impossible. So anything is impossible if you have the will to do it. The park and community deserves I'll leave a couple of paragraphs and finish, as you've told me I must. The park and the community deserves a lease that would enable the park to reflect its unique position and historic standing, which would enhance its and Takapuna's national and international reputation. We have the experience, knowledge and contacts to enable us to develop a park worthy and to sustain it up to its 100th anniversary. We have plans and have upgraded the caravan since we've been in the park, but the council buildings, which are council owned, and the infrastructure is what we would like to tackle next. I welcomed the views that were given by the Save the Takapuna Beach Holiday Park group, and we would more than welcome working with you to give the community the best outcome possible for the holiday park in its future. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions from members? Are there any questions from members? I have one. Just that remark that you made, Mr. Mason, around since 2008 you've been seeking to have an extension of the lease. At what stage did you and Marius purchase the lease? Was that in 2008?
That was in 2008, and during our due diligence we contacted the council and asked if there were any barriers to the lease being renegotiated, and they said there were none. Following that, we applied for a lease, and we were told at this stage it needed to be discussed at the local board level. When we were coming up to the Rugby World Cup, because we were very aware of the massive number of international visitors coming to the holiday park, we again applied for an extension to the lease so we could complete works to at least upgrade the bathroom facilities and the kitchen before we had this huge influx of visitors. We never heard anything from that request.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions then? Oh, sorry, Member Hale.
Sorry, can I just explain on that too? Because it's news to me that you applied for a new lease in 2008. Certainly the amalgamation took place in 2010 and I was involved in council at that time. So I'm very surprised that it didn't come. If it came to council, I certainly cannot recall it.
We followed what we were advised by the property department,
right,
which was to send the request to the property manager at the time.
Right, and you say you got no response from council at that point?
In 2008 we did. It
Yeah.
was when we were looking for upgrades to increase the lease for the Rugby World Cup.
But so in 2008, sorry to labour this point, just trying to clarify in my mind, 2008 you asked council about an extension or a new lease, and what was the response to that?
The response was that, the exact wording was the local board had already taken part of the holiday park and there was no intention to remove the rest of the holiday park, so the likelihood of you getting a lease was high. Or good, I should say, not high.
I think we can accept that there might be some confusion of the message. In 2008 there wasn't a local board, so we'll maybe get some clarification offline. So anyway, with that in mind, I'd like to move receipt of Mr. Rick Mason's presentation, seconded by Member Hale. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, carried. That brings us to our final presenter, Paul Williams. When you're ready.
I wish to thank the board for the opportunity of speaking, and I wish to thank them for having a poll and letting the people speak. And I believe that the people are speaking, and they have spoken, and it's quite resounding. Now, I'm not involved with any of the groups. I just am passionate about that campground. I spend a lot of time down there. I wander around the campground. I talk to people. I see what's going on. It is a little shabby. I can see why it's a little shabby. The poor campground, they weren't even allowed to put a sign up to say there's a campground down here. I don't know how they're supposed to run a business when that happens. Kiwi camping is such a part of our lives. It's something we do as children. We go there in a tent and we camp and we fish and we boat and we do all these things, and we take our children camping. and our children will take their children camping. And to have a campground in the middle of Auckland, my gosh, that's so wonderful. I think the whole world might hear about this meeting. It's been a wonderful meeting. It's been a meeting of democracy and talk, and everything's come up, hasn't it? Connections with people that we don't even know, but they seem to be making all these decisions behind our back. I'm sorry, I've got all these notes and I'm winging it. Peter, you have fought for this thing for what, 18 or 20 people to have their little parking space for their boats. We are all sitting here. What's the time? We've come week after week. We've signed petitions. We've sat and we've talked, all to try and prevent 20 or 30 people taking over our reserve. My gosh, this reserve is prime land. It's flat. It can be there forever. The dictionary defines reserves as areas set aside. They are green spaces. They are spaces, not everyone goes there all the time, but I can think, gee, I want to go down to the beach today. I can go to the Takapuna campground and I can wander and I can enjoy the peace and the tranquility and the wonderful Kiwi experience. I can go do that. But not if there's a yachting centre there. Not with yachts all over. We've seen a photo. A few yachts, they took up that whole front 1/3 of the reserve was taken up with yachts rigging. Where are they going to rig 40 boats? Overseas, there were a lot of submissions from overseas. A lot of Kiwis live overseas. A lot of overseas visitors come to New Zealand and they have this wonderful experience. They have an experience of the sea, the ocean, the people, Takapuna. We want them to come. Councillor Jan O'Connor, you said that we live here and perhaps we won't utilise their campground, but we want people to come. We want them to stay. They want to talk to us, to see how we live, our wonderful piece of paradise. And some people would have that taken away from us. Us, the people that are here tonight, giving their time. I spent all day at the last meeting sitting, waiting to be the last speaker. So, I think people have spoken. I think they are speaking. I realise I'm out of time. But you know what? I want a couple of minutes to say one thing. Oh, Chris Darby, you asked it, one of the things, you asked Mr. Donaldson's son, what would make the area down there a world-class facility? And it's like Mr. Donaldson's son didn't have an answer. He had nothing. And I was like, oh my gosh, you could put a sculpture there, a wind sculpture, a tide sculpture that goes up and down. People could talk about it. Something about Peter Blake. Something about our community. We could have a Maori design on the pavement. We could have, the last thing was something that I had. And it'll come to me. And since I'm last, I'm going to take a minute or two. I will take a minute or two, else you'll have to escort me out of here. There is a place in Hawke's Bay. Excuse me, I'm talking. There is a place in Hawke's Bay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, can I just stop you there? Can I just stop you there?
No. You have said enough, and I'm the last one, and I'm going to take my spot. And I know it's... Thank you.
It's not a question of time that I was drawing attention to.
I know
it's not a question of time that I'm drawing attention to. It is the disrespectful conduct towards members and towards the chair. And
I think you deserved it.
Okay, you may finish your point, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Mr. Darby, the third thing about the area to make it world-class, we have a world-class heritage site there. We have a preserved fossil forest that's there. There's no signs. No one knows anything about it. That would draw tourists, give them some interest, make a kiosk where they can sit out of the rain. There was a park in Hawke's Bay. It was the last little bit of podocarp forest. It was 32 acres of forest. You walk into that forest and it's just magical. The sunlight comes down, the birds twitter through it, the smell of musty, it's just wonderful. And during World War II, they They wouldn't make it a reserve, but when they did finally make a reserve, they decided they needed to cut half of that reserve. They took 13 acres to build spas for World War II biplanes. That reserve is gone forever. Gone. There's no more forest like that. It's gone. There's no more campgrounds in the city like that. Let's keep it. I think everyone's spoken, and I think it's pretty much unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Are there any questions? Mr. Williams, there's a question from Member Cohen. Oh, sorry, no, okay, he's just moving it. Member Cohen would like to move, seconded by Member Gillen. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, carried. Members. Yes.
To item 9, and I commend you that.
Can you please turn your speaker box on, Member Cohen?
Oh, yes, sure.
Thank you.
I commend you, Mr. Chair, for allowing 12 people to speak. But I do have one area of real concern, and it's a real pity, that we've heard the official line in regards to the HAT and the community hub proposal. I would have liked to have heard somebody from the community speaking in favour of it. I was just wondering.
I take the point, Member Cohen, but attempts that were made by the staff to figure
Find
out exactly
somebody.
to find out what the positions of people who were submitting as we were filling up the script were not necessarily always successful, and so we weren't able to determine as we were filling the slots, many of which were filled before the report was actually released. We weren't able to determine what the speaking points were. So if you do have that position, then I'm sure you can do so outside of the meeting.
No, what I was going to say, that you've been exceedingly generous, and so I was just empowering you to perhaps suggest one more speaker, no disrespect to Paul, that if there was someone who was from the community
I
who
think
actually wanted to
that's
speak from
unfair. I think that is unfair, considering there are a number of people who have asked if they could speak at this meeting, and we had to draw a line and say if they've spoken at previous meetings, you wouldn't be able to speak at this meeting. So in the interest of natural justice, I appreciate the suggestion, but I think with 3 hours and 20 minutes of public forum and deputations, we must now move on to the consideration of the item. So I move to item 9, extraordinary business, and there was no extraordinary business at the close of the agenda. Item 10, no notices of motion at the close of the agenda, which brings us to item 11, the results of the Takapuna Beach Reserve consultation. Now, members, as you will be in receipt of the Chair's recommendations, I'm going to foreshadow an intention to move that, and it's been seconded by Member Hale. And there are also... Point of order from Member Gillen.
Well, my point of order is, Mr. Chair, that you accepted my motions as foreshadowed for this item when I raised them earlier.
I appreciate that, and I'm
so-
willing to accept them as amendments
No,
to the items.
that-
But
that's out of order.
Member Gillen, there has been a well-established precedent by the previous chair of this board in particular that items that are moved that haven't been pre-circulated to members do not take precedent over recommendations which have been pre-circulated.
Well,
So I'm sticking
that's a very
with
novel
that
ruling,
tradition.
because that has never happened in my experience on this board.
It has happened with this local board,
What
and that
has
is my
happened
ruling.
in all meetings, formal meetings that I've been involved in, is that when motions are moved and accepted by the chair and they are the first motions, then they are the motions on the table.
But
You can't then say, oh, well, I'll accept those, but I'll set them
Member,
aside and I'll move my own.
Your motions were not moved when the item was called. Mine were the first that were moved. Member Cohen, I will come to you. I fully appreciate that, but I'm willing to first... No, it's not. We're not when a point of order is currently being discussed. So this point of order is I'm ruling that the recommendations of the chair will be put first, and that yours can either be put as amendments to that or subsequent to, so long as there are no direct negatives. Member Cohen, you have a point of order.
That's the issue. Because
No, Member Gillen, I have
protocol
rules.
is the motions that are moved first, and you accepted them as the first
No, I didn't.
foreshadowed motions. You did.
I did
And-
not.
And
Not
I actually
when the
have.
item-
I've got quite a few witnesses here tonight.
Member Gillen.
They were moved.
Okay.
They
I'm
were
go-
moved and seconded.
Member
You
Gillen.
accepted them,
Member Gillen.
and they should be the primary motions on the table. You did not move yours at that time. Just because you pre-circulated them, they were not part of the meeting. And they're still not part of the meeting until mine have been dealt with.
Are you finished? Member Gillen, I have ruled, and I have ruled with a consistent ruling to the previous chair, who is now contradicting this, but also I have ruled in the position that is once the item is called, items are moved. I recognise that we would debate this at item 11. I never said that it would be the first item we would debate, and you are more than welcome to move that as an amendment. But I will not, at this stage, take them first because the chair's recommendations have been pre-circulated, and in fairness to members, I gave everyone the opportunity to that. This is the first that we have seen of
Well, you've
yours,
opened the
and so we'll
decision for
move from that
judicial
point.
review because it's inappropriate.
And if you wish to, then you can take a judicial review, Member Gillen. Member Cohen, you have a fresh point of order. What is your point of order?
Yes, I'm just stating three.
Can you please turn on your speaker box?
I wish it went on automatically like everybody. Okay.
13.14.4.d, misrepresentation of a statement. I don't recollect ever that I actually had that as a policy. And if you can draw it to my attention, that would be wonderful.
Sorry, misrepresentation of a statement made by a member. Yes, I can specifically recall it, Member Cohen. It was a meeting of the board when we were discussing, in fact, I think this item, and my amendments were put up as, I immediately moved them and they were seconded by Member Rowe, but then you set them aside so that your chair's recommendations could be seconded and debated first. That is my recollection, and I am fully aware that that is what was discussed at that meeting. Secondly, misrepresenting statements are supposed to be for earlier in the meeting, as I ruled earlier. But I see no harm in us proceeding on the basis of the chair's recommendations first and then subsequent motions after that. And I've ruled.
Well, Mr.
And
Chair,
is it a fresh point of order?
Yes, well, it is.
Or is it a threat of judicial review, Member Gillen?
Well, actually, I'm not the first in this chamber who's threatened other members with High Court action, and I'll talk about that later.